Alright, hey guys, I am hoping to help some people out. I'm going to try to do some work on my E39 tonight. Probably going to span a couple videos, replacing a couple things. Put on some new springs. Big project's going to be putting in a new steering rack. And then we're also going to be putting in some rear subframe bushings and rear differential bushings. I wasn't having any luck finding those videos online, so I figured I might as well record myself doing them and hopefully help some of you guys out. Here we go. We're going to start working on my E39. Alright, so this is my 2002 BMW 530 Sport Package. E39 is the chassis code for it. I've had this 4-5 years maybe at this point, and I've done a lot of maintenance and stuff to keep up with the car. One of the most common problems, it seems, with any BMW is leaking steering racks. So I have a replacement rack that's going to go into here. I also have new inner tie rods, those came with the rack, and then new outer tie rods, which we're going to be doing. So when I'm going to remove the old rack, I'm going to use a pickle fork to remove the tie rod ends out here. But if you plan to reuse your tie rods, I'd suggest getting the proper tool to do that. They make a little clamp style that slides in between and then put some force underneath the ball joint to push it up. I'm not worrying about that since I have all new parts right now and I have a pickle fork and they work really well to separate ball joints. Some of the other things going on with this car, recently put new conies on here. When we get it up in there, you'll see it. Coney Sports are on here, but with the factory sports springs and all new parts, it actually seemed to give me more of a wheel gap up here. I don't know if it's a common thing, but the front suspension was raised up. Seems like it's a little higher than the Sport Package normally would be. It might be the lower mount on the conies, but I decided to go with some H&R Sport Package springs. We're going to see what that looks like afterwards. I always have the sport springs to go back to. I know a lot of people like the aggressiveness yet still comfortable stock sport springs from BMW. When we go to the rear, I'll show you one of the main reasons I decided to go with an aftermarket spring, and I can explain some more about that. But for now, we're going to get this up in the air. Alright, so now we got the vehicle in the air, secured. I also like putting the wheels underneath the sides, under the frame rails. Just a precaution. May save your life. Wheels could crack, who knows, but it just makes me feel a little better about it. We're going to do a couple different things, but to start with, we're going to remove the nut on the ball joint. And we're not going to remove it all the way, but we are going to spin it as far off as we can. And then once we do that, we're going to get the pickle fork in here and try to split this apart. My boots are already torn, but as I said before, I have a new outer tie rod that's going on the new steering rack that has the new inner rods. So all these boots are going to be fresh and new, not going to have to worry about it. So if you don't need to save this, pickle fork should be fine. Just make sure you're not marring up any of the surfaces in here. I believe these are aluminum, so you do need to be careful about that. I usually put some grease on it. The proper tool comes in here, slides in here like the pickle fork would, but then clamps down and presses this the end of the ball joint out. So we're going to start doing that. Looks to be 18 18 millimeter. And we're gonna try to see if we can be lucky enough to get in here with an extension maybe. And try to zip this off with the impact. If we get it with one nice zip, it should crack free and spin right out. Otherwise, there is an Allen head that in the top of this, so you can use an Allen to hold it while you use a box end or open end wrench to try to loosen it. I had these apart fairly recently, so should come right off, but cars, they don't always work like that. I'm gonna use a swivel on this. Just fits in there. Super simple. Okay, so we spun it all the way off. I'm going to spin it back level. Just saves it so this arm doesn't come out and swing out of control on you. Now we need a pickle fork and a mini sledge. Okay, got our pickle fork. Clean off some of that old grease and debris. I had some leaves in it. I don't really need that dirt getting in there. Usually dip it down. I just have some Mobile 1 synthetic grease laying around. Usually would be good to help prevent one of the boots being ripped. In this case, the boot's already ripped, but it'll also help it hopefully not damage that aluminum in there either. We'll just kind of wedge it in there. A couple taps to align it. Hopefully one good whack will knock it free. There we go. Popped right off. Now we have that nut still on there. Loosen that up. And it's out. I don't know if you guys can see that now. Looks like it might be a little too, camera might be a little too high. But our outer tie rod, ball joint is separated now. We didn't mar up that surface at all. Looks like there's an insert in there that goes into here. There is a spacer, don't lose these. Make sure it's doesn't pop out or fall out. I don't believe you can order these separate. I think I got worried when I first did these a couple of years ago. Yeah, don't lose them. Okay guys, we're going mobile here. Next item, it's gonna be hard to get in here and see, but is, let's see if we can locate it up in here. Yeah, see the steering shaft here? There's a bolt going through the steering shaft. Can't see the head of it here. You just see the threads coming through. I believe it's a 14 millimeter. If you have a ratcheting box end, that is perfect to get in there. After we do that, we're gonna come underneath here and start doing some work under here. We're gonna remove this splash shield, the front underbody shield there. Mine's a little oily, covered in power steering fluid. As you can imagine, that's why I'm doing this job. We're gonna remove that. Then we're gonna look at doing the mounts for the power steering rack. But before we do that, we need to get up there and remove that steering shaft bolt so we can pull the rack away. And then it is a good idea to keep in mind the position of the rack when you remove this. So before I undo that, I'm going to go in the car and try to center the steering wheel. So I'm going to count my rotations from left and right and try to center it. When you reassemble everything, if that's not centered, you're going to get a DSC code, because the car is not going to understand where the wheels are, because there's a sensor on that steering shaft. So if you can do it without messing up that sensor, it's perfect. I had this rack in and out a couple times before, and only one of the 2 times I think I did I mess that up, and I just came in here and realigned the splines and it was perfect and the code went away. I'm sure you can get rid of the code with some kind of reset procedure. I never had to come to that, so hopefully you don't either, but just keep that in mind when you're undoing that, is to count the splines or make a mark, but try to center the steering wheel the best you can. Alright, so we got it out. It was actually a 13 millimeter. Not that you need to focus in on that, but it's just a little bolt. Now put this somewhere safe, don't lose it. I like throwing my lugs underneath the jack stand. I'll usually put all my bolts that I need to keep under there too. I don't think there's anything else similar to this size that we're going to be removing for this job, so it shouldn't get lost, but do not lose this. Otherwise, you're going to have to order another one. Very important. Keeps your steering shaft and the rack connected, and you definitely need that. So let's get under the front, and we're going to remove that splash shield now. It's Phillips heads. I believe there's about 8 bolts, 8 screws, twisting connections. So let's get under there and do that now so we can drop that shield down, and then we can look at the steering rack bolts. At some point, I don't know if we're going to do it tonight, we're going to bring over the engine hoist, hook that up to the motor, because we're eventually going to have to drop the subframe down to get clearance to remove the rack. It's not difficult. There's only 6 bolts. I believe they're about 18 millimeters, 3 on each side. If they've been loosened before like mine have, maybe you did your engine mounts before or something like that, and you did that to fit them in there. Once you break them free, they're pretty easy. They're long. The threads aren't exposed to any elements, so they're usually not corroded. I'm in the Northeast, so our cars usually have their fair share of corrosion and rust. This car wasn't too bad. The exhaust is a different story, which we're going to get to eventually on this project. Every time I've done something where I had to remove the exhaust, I let it hang down, and the flange right at the end of the headers after the cats are rusted, and have everything to replace it. That's going to be a fun project. I'm sure some other people have that too, and we'll go through that together to see how difficult that is. So right now, we're going to remove that splash shield, and then see how far we can get tonight before I have to call it quits. Tomorrow, I have to get this rack out. I only have a couple days to get this core back, so it needs to come out. So if we don't finish it tonight, we'll be right at it tomorrow trying to get it out. We were going to do these springs. I didn't want to deviate from the steering rack job first. One, because I want to get that out so I can send the core in, but I also didn't want to get too confusing. While we have this apart, those tie rods did have to come off to remove the springs and drop the struts down. Well, let's not get too sidetracked. I'll continue with the steering rack. That splash shield's removed now. Now there's one more step we should do before we start messing with the subframe. We need to drain the fluid out of this rack. The only way I know to do it is the messy way. We need to remove the lines. So there's 2 lines going to this. One of them you can come down with an extension from the top. I forget the size off the top of my head, but socket and a bunch of extensions to break it free. Or you can get down here with a box end or open end wrench to loosen it. There is it's a banjo bolt, and there's 2 washers on either side. Those are the gaskets or the seals. So when you're removing it, just make sure you don't lose those in the bottom of your pan. It's not the end of the world, but try to keep on to those. You should replace them with new ones. My new rack should have ones. So there should be a total 4 of those washers, and they're 2 different sizes. So you'll notice that when you're taking the bolts out, that the banjo bolts are 2 different sizes, those washers are 2 different sizes. So you can't really screw up which line goes where either. It is messy though. Empty your reservoir before you do this, either with like a syringe, turkey baster kind of thing. That might help reduce it, because all that fluid's going to come out of there one way or the other, plus whatever's in the rack. If you have an old power steering line laying around, maybe you're replacing the ones. If you remove them from the other ends, you could remove them there first, put them into the drain pan, and then turn the rack left and right a couple times to get all the fluid pumped out of it. You're never going to get it completely dry. As much as you can get out now, better, because it's going to come out when you're removing it one way or the other. So let's get in there and make a mess. Alright, I went to the GoPro footage under there. Hopefully you guys could see it. If you don't know, these are what banjo bolts look like. They're a hollow bolt with holes, and the fluid's you're gonna bolt this down, has these gaskets, seals it there, so the fluid can travel through the bolt and out these ports that it has on the side. You can see there's two different sizes. One almost fits inside the other one. They're drastically different, and the lines are different too as well. You'll have to remove the bigger one first to even get to the other one because it's kind of tucked underneath the engine mount in there. I ended up using 7/8 open-end wrench. That was one of the larger wrenches I had. I don't think I had anything metric. I can put a socket on, see exactly what size that is, so you guys don't end up screwing up. And this one, again, I went with the 3/4 open-end box-end wrench to loosen it. I got my metric sockets right here. That appears to be a 19 for the smaller one, 22 for the larger one, but 19 and 22. So that'll get you the proper, if you have any open end or box end wrenches, that's probably what you're going to need to get in there. I think the largest metric I have is 18, so I was kind of out of luck and had to go to the standard wrenches. They will work, just make sure you don't strip the edges. Make sure it's seated right. So the fluid draining out of there right now. I think I'm going to call it quits for tonight. The next steps going to involve removing the mounts for the steering rack and lowering the subframe itself. And for me to start all that tonight is one big project. So we're going to jump back at this tomorrow and hopefully have that rack out so I can box it up and send it back. Alright guys, thanks for watching.